1930 next Friday, the 29th. If you cannot make it, you need to have a chit. And GMTs are also due the 29th.
Yeah, there is. Well, like, what if you did that? That's the only thing I can really see is making like updating it to like the 21st century, like making it look really, the TV. About being fine to get. Because like you get that still right. Right now. TV or something. In most TVs, that one, I would that one is so if we got a new TV, we take the old TV and put it in the new something like we can use it. If it's a model. I think we could get a lot more improvement if like we're like yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing?
Good afternoon.
My name's Nick Grossman. I'm a police officer here with the University Department. I'm housed in the same building you all are. I did 9 years in the Army as well. 3 years active, 6 with the Guard. So I come from a similar background as you all. I was sitting in similar seats as you all at one time too. So you guys are kind of my favorite audience to talk to. You get it. We come from similar areas. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is active shooters, active killers. You probably hear active shooter more than anything else. We like to refer to them as killers because you don't always have them using, a firearm. Sometimes it's a knife. It's whatever's readily available. I mean, it could be any big clothesline. It just kind of depends. So we'll talk about a few things related to this as well. How much time are you thinking?
You got an hour and a half if you want.
An hour and a half. I think it's probably going to take right around an hour, but it just depends on how interactive you all are. Speaking of which, this is laid back atmosphere from what I'm doing. So if you have a question, just please ask me. I'd rather have you ask me than wait till the very end and then forget about it. So that's not an issue at all. Oh, the other thing I want to say too is this presentation is really fluid. I mean, you could probably guess that just with this sort of dynamic. It's not like it's anything static that's just going to be set in stone. So we change it all the time. And because of that, you guys are actually the first audience to get this presentation in its current format. It's even changed a little bit since we talked about it last fall. So just know about that. And also, I designed this presentation. Has anybody in here been through our VIRT, or Violent Incident Response class? Just a couple hands. And that's fine. If you ever get the chance to do it, I highly recommend it. It's quite a bit longer than this, right around 2.5 to 3 hours. It's more, it's not quite so much death by PowerPoint either. It's more interactive. They'll play through different scenarios, some of which are dramatized, some of which are actual footage. So it's pretty interesting, but it weighs heavily on the aftermath of Virginia Tech, Columbine. There's a couple other ones that it talks about too. But so this presentation is designed like a bridge between the other course I teach, which is just recognizing disturbing behavior. This one is more focusing on, okay, now we we've identified some issues with this person, what do we do next? Before it would lead up to, you know, an active killer type of incident. So that's kind of what this is. Obviously, there's no way to predict violence 100%. This is just giving you some tools for your tool belt to be able to recognize these problems before they happen. So these are what I see. Is there a pointer on here too?
The very front.
There we go. So these are some of the things I see as the main issues of this presentation. And again, if you have feedback for me afterwards too, my email is on the last slide. Go ahead and send it to me. I don't care if it's good or bad. Feedback is all good in my eyes. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm a big boy. So, and then yeah, towards the end through this EAP, this was taken from a presentation I did for HR specifically. So it's going to be a little wordy. And I apologize for that, but I'm going to try to trim the fat the next time I give the presentation as well. So you don't have to pay over attention to that. But if there are any slides that are too wordy that you think too, just tell me to stop so you can all read it so I don't go past it too fast. Some of these things, like run, hide, fight, you've probably heard at least that phrasing before. And then, yeah, this will segue nicely with the vert too, just because, God forbid, if one of these situations ever does happen, we want you to understand that our response is going to be very quick, and we want you to know what that's going to look like and how to react and what we expect from everybody to help out with it. Having said that, so basically, and the way I tried to set this up is I tried to highlight some of the main phrases that I think you need to pay more attention to than others. So, I already showed you this, so it doesn't really do me much good to ask you what your definition of an active killer is or an active shooter. But does anybody have anything else that they want to throw in besides just this? Maybe not. This is the last class of the day too, I'm assuming. Okay. Well, like I said, these things are very dynamic. They usually happen very quickly. You know, there's not a whole lot of time, but in most situations, something was said or, you know, alluded to beforehand. It might be something that's not obvious, that you just really didn't think about at the time, but almost always someone says something prior to doing that, committing the act. This is kind of a pre-9/11 sign. I think most people nowadays realize that violence is dynamic and it can and will happen anywhere. Okay, perception. If you watch the news, you turn on your TV at all, really, or you surf the net, you do whatever, social media, it really seems like these things are happening all the time, every day. Why do we think that is? There's a bunch of reasons, but can anybody offer anything?
Politics.
Politics is a big one.
The media just highlights it.
Media in general is, yeah, that's huge. Extremism.
The internet allows people to learn how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, internet very much is a double-edged sword. I mean, it's great for a lot of things, but then it can turn around and bite us for, you know, things like this. And, you know, it says employees here, obviously, but I'm talking about everybody. And that's just by being attuned to our surroundings and, you know, just understanding that we do play a role in this. Soft targets. Why do we think people select soft targets that want to do something like this? That want to commit these violent acts?
Easy.
It's easier. Yeah, exactly. Whoever said that. It's, you know, well, think about it. What do they want to see happen? Oh, that's the next question anyway. What do they want to see happen? What's their goal by committing this act? Visibility, yeah.
Mass casualty?
Body count, yeah, absolutely. Going along with body count is notoriety. You know, for whatever reason, nobody paid attention to them, and they want to do something to leave a mark on the world. That's why most times, not always, but most times they end up committing suicide before they're caught too, because they don't want to face the music after they do it. Anybody else think anything? Yeah. they pick soft targets specifically because they know that the audience there is not going to be able to fight back. I mean, if they wanted a fair fight, they'd come knock on our door. They'd come knock on, you know, the local armory's door or whatever if they wanted that. But that's not what they want. As far as pattern selection, there isn't always a specific one. Those are the most dangerous ones, actually, the ones that are just picked at random. But most of the time in the aftermath, those of us that are kind of the data geeks that go in, I'm an Intel guy, so I'll say that, that actually go in afterwards and try to, you know, assess the situation, try to figure out what signals were being given off beforehand to, you know, that might have been able to be prevented. And then these are some of the more common motives that we tend to see as far as why. The mental illness thing, I think, often gets made a scapegoat for, oh, they're just crazy or whatever. But very rarely is someone that has a mental illness also like a sociopath. You know, most mental illnesses are able to be curbed with medication if it's something to that extent that needs it. But most people with mental issues are not, you know, like your Adam Lances at Sandy Hook. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about what some of these threats look like. Okay, so yeah. I try not to say these guys' names during these presentations, by the way, just because, screw them, quite honestly. I don't want to give them the power that they were seeking in life. Well, some of them are still alive. This dude's still alive, the South Carolina guy. But yeah, this is the church shooter from just like about a year ago, I believe.
6
I
months.
can't remember the date exactly. Yeah, June of 15, sorry. Virginia Tech, obviously. And this, by the way, the reason there's a little news icon, this is the picture of himself that he sent to NBC because he wanted that to be used. You know, he didn't send his driver's license photo or anything. And then this is, you know, Sandy Hook guy. So, I mean, people look like a variety of ways, but, you know, some of these guys, I mean, you can tell there's something going on there or not going on, as it were. And, you know, the same with both of the other ones. Other times, you know, excluding this picture right here, you can't tell. Does anybody know where this one is from? This is the one people usually say, who's that guy?
Is that E?
Which one?
Are you pointing at E?
Yeah, D, I mean, sorry. These are both D, these are both E, these are both F. This is from Northern Illinois University in DeKalb in 2006. He was, by all accounts, a very normal guy, never, you know, even showed any interest in firearms, let alone picking up a shotgun and walking into a crowded auditorium and just start blasting away, and that's exactly what he did. And again, dead, not dead. And I don't even want to talk about him because it pisses me off just looking at him.
Is that Fort Hood?
Yeah, the 09 Fort Hood. It's sad that we have to say which time at Fort Hood. Yeah, yeah, I won't say his name anyway. And then, does anybody recognize this one? You guys should.
The Navy Yard shooter.
Yeah, exactly. And that was just a year or two ago too. So. Basically, what this slide's saying is that this isn't something that just up and happens one day. This is a long mental process that continues over time, and almost always there are indicators that are displayed. It could be something relatively subtle, like, you know, a person stops showering. You know, that's a more nasty one, I guess, but it could be a few minor things, and like those minor things by themselves might not seem like such a big deal, but when you start to add them all together, that's when we're pointing at, you know, potential behavioral issues. So the perceived versus actual thing is important too, because it doesn't always matter if, in reality, like if you think you're failing a class because you're used to getting really good grades in high school, you come to college and suddenly things aren't as easy for you, right? Well, for most of us anyway, for a few there. But, it just, I lost my train of thought, sorry. Anyway. They almost always say something beforehand, whether in person, online. Online is becoming more and more prevalent. This could be a big one, explosive outbursts. If they're talking about things to you every day that, you know, you don't even know the person that well, and they're talking about having financial problems, this one is a more EO catered one as well, but, yeah, early intervention is really the biggest thing here. And that's probably one of the biggest takeaways from this entire presentation, quite honestly, because we would rather get 100 calls a day and have it be absolutely nothing than have you just not call and then, you know, we end up having to play catch up because something bad happened. I think as human beings, we just have this natural tendency to not want to get each other in trouble. I mean, you're taught ever since, you know, you're a young age, snitches get stitches, you know, things like that. Well, when it's people's lives, you know, your parents sent you guys here, or some of them did, some of them did not probably, but they have a reasonable expectation of safety for all of you. So we try to ingrain in people that we talk to not to think about it that way, but think about how the potential, you know, for life-saving could come into play as well. And this I probably shouldn't even have to say, but this, it goes without saying, if you help promote respect amongst each other, amongst everybody that you deal with on a daily basis, you're somewhat preventing bad things from happening to begin with. This plays a little bit off of the last slide. So basically what it's saying is, how many times have you watched a news story and the person they're talking to is like second cousin removed or neighbor 5 blocks down the street or whoever that supposedly knows everything about these people, right? But they always say something like that. I don't know, they just snapped one day. How often do you think somebody just wakes up with a perfectly normal disposition in life and decides to go on a shooting spree? Or like that kid in Philadelphia a couple years ago that took butcher knives to school and sliced up like 20 some odd kids and a security guard. That doesn't just happen, you know. They formulate plans for years, and it starts with, and this slide isn't in here, but it starts with just the basic like ideation phase, like coming up with things in your mind that you think are grievances or whatever, and then you move. But that's where it ends for the vast majority of us. I'm not saying if you daydream about, you know, kicking somebody's butt that that wronged you, that you're necessarily a bad person, but that's where it ends for most people. Individuals like we're talking about take that to the next step and start planning for it and preparing for it. And then they might even do a trial run, something like that. And then obviously they put the plan into motion. So that's what we're talking about here. So these are some of the common indicators that a potentially violent behavior might be brewing. And like I said before too, just because a couple of these things might fit you or somebody you know, that doesn't necessarily mean you're at danger of, you know, being violent or this person that you know is or whatever. But when you add all these things up, like, I think I'm burning out your battery here. When you line all these things up and put them in, you know, in a row, and it starts to show pattern behavior, that's what we're more concerned about. I think at some point, probably everyone in here has been depressed. But we're talking about to the point of where you withdraw from society, you become almost like, you know, shuttered in, like a hermit, that kind of thing. And then, yeah, rules are meant to be broken or not. So we're talking about individuals that really don't do it for a reason, but just do it just to do it, that kind of thing. Substance abuse is always going to be big, whether it's legal or not. Sudden fascination with violent media, meaning an individual that maybe has never even talked about violent movies before, or firearms, or gaming systems or anything like that, and now suddenly that's all they can talk about, that might be an indication that there's something going on here at the cognitive level that's changing for them. Paranoid or delusional behavior. I highlighted that one specifically because, and I'm, not a psychologist or anything, but typically the way the mind works is if you are starting to get really paranoid about things and seeing things, that is the final stages of psychosis. So what's next? Well, next is the action. So if you're seeing somebody that's very delusional and very paranoid, you need to pick up the phone now because they probably are going to do something within the relatively near future. Would anybody add anything else to this list? I think there's actually another. No, there's not. Sorry.
Would it be to fix the indicators of suicide, to start giving their stuff away or anything like that?
Yeah. Actually, I should have added that to the withdrawing part because actually, and the 09 Fort Hood killer did that very thing. He actually, before he went and committed that act on Fort Hood, he gave away to a neighbor pretty much all of his worldly possessions. And she thought, that's funny, and didn't say anything about it, even though, she really didn't know him other than just seeing him in the hall and saying hi. So why would you do something like that unless you weren't planning on? He didn't think he was going to survive that, and he's paralyzed, but did not die, unfortunately. And then, the prior offender thing. Sorry, go ahead.
You said call someone. Who would you call in the event that you notice that somebody died?
You know what? It depends on the situation. If it's something where you just don't know and it could be an honest mistake or whatever, I would just report it to your next level supervisor and let them take it to, we have a chain of command for a reason. If it's something blatant though, like, I saw Johnny with a shotgun in the back of his car and he was making all sorts of nonsense, about shooting up the place, blah, 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 then call 911, I don't know if there's a slide in here about it, but just while I'm talking about 911, if you call 911 from your cell phone, have a good idea of your cardinal directions. Tell the 911 dispatcher where you are because it'll just go from the nearest tower, so we won't really know exactly where you are. And they'll just say Iowa State because it's pretty big, say Pearson Hall or whatever. If you call it from a landline, though, it's going to go to the nearest police station. So just a little bit something to know. So this just kind of starts talking about what you can do beforehand. Things that we probably have thought of at least and maybe not put into action yet. So start making a plan. For example, how many of us remember doing like fire drills and tornado drills and all that in grade school? Probably everybody, yeah. How many active killer drills have you ever done in your life? Probably not very many, if at all. And those of you that are in this room might have at least done a few or at least talked about it. But when I speak to groups from companies and corporations and stuff, I get 0 hands every single time. And like, when's the last time somebody died of a fire around here? It's been a while, Actually, there was one a couple of years ago, but hey, it's not really what I'm talking about. I know this is a lot of words. So basically, if we don't train, what good is the plan? At very least, I try to talk to people about coming up with something that looks, it can look like a floor plan from like a fire escape, or just, again, these things are very dynamic because if it's a shooter outside or something like that with a rifle and a scope, we probably don't want to evacuate the whole building because that's maybe what he's waiting for. He's waiting for a big, group to just open fire on. So it's really going to be important that we communicate with each other. We have a system of communications and probably needs to go beyond just cell phones because what happens when there's a home football game here and you try to use your cell phone? Like nothing for most of us, right? So if there ever is a mass casualty type of situation like this too, we need to have a plan B, C, D, however much it takes. Sorry, that's a little repetitive, I just kind of said that. But this does talk about some of the different departments or offices that probably should be involved in this kind of stuff. And it does include other emergencies too. And quite honestly, we probably go to more medical calls than anything else as far as emergency calls. This starts to get in just a little bit to the whole run, hide, fight thing. And since I brought it up, I'll just kind of talk to you about it for a little bit here. Those are kind of seen as your options. Well, the fourth option would be to freeze, and that's not an option. So, but those, typically when people are presented with some sort of tragedy or some sort of event that screws up the OODA loop, you're going to either run, you're going to hide, or you're going to fight back. So that's basically what it's talking about. And then once you get to the appropriate distance away or you're safe, if you're in like a room that's really, really secure, try call 911. And then this is really important. And it really more links to this one, because what's going to happen if you try to fight and you don't give it everything you've got? You're just going to piss them off and you're going to get killed probably for sure. So go all out or not at all if you're going to do that option. This one wouldn't apply to you guys as much, but it just talks about what the different managers of departments and offices can do to help to mitigate these things. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. And this is more for administrators as well, but I mean, we're all in this room because we're different levels of leadership, right? So, you know, you do want to at least be thinking about those things, because everybody in here is going to go someplace else and have several different jobs in their career, and so it's incumbent upon you to make sure that it happens to your folks. We've been doing a better job of that within the last few years. We've actually, our department, City of Ames Police Department, the County Sheriff's Office, and then some of our local smaller communities like Boone, Huxley, places like that. We've trained together a lot, especially during breaks like winter break, summer, whatever, just because we have a little bit more time. And it's so important, it has to happen. Okay. This is going to be more of a business type of slide too, but we do provide a service, at least the unit that I work for does, with local businesses, to include the university, where we'll go in and kind of evaluate their office space and try to give them an honest assessment of some of the things that work and some of the things that maybe should be thought better and don't work very well, to make it safer. I mean, we try to be budget conscious as well. We know everybody can't afford, you know, everything. But there's some fairly cost-effective ways of making your office safer, which I'm sure your force protection people have already thought of. So. That's basically what I just said. Sorry. Afterwards, like a debriefing, I'm assuming you have something in place to kind of debrief people if like a critical incident happens, and you know, we've been better at doing that as well, but I think that's an area that often gets left out, or if not straight up forgotten about. And it's really important to do anyway. Don't feel bad about going to counseling services. I mean, I've only been out for a couple years, but I know when I was in, it was kind of a stigma type thing. If you get identified as somebody that needs to go to counseling services, psych services, whatever, I think that needs to go away. It really, really does, because they're really important. And everyone has issues, so. standing here talking to you about some of this stuff, I see how wordy this is, and I'll work on this for the next year. Forget if I have, hold on just a second. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this in a couple slides, so I'll just like read it right now. Okay. So the vert training that I told you about right at the very beginning, that is, that's more like, you know, stuff hits the fan, what do you do now? Because we all know how we're going to react. I brought this up already, that's kind of the national standard. I stole that from a DoD group. Anyway, you'll also hear lockdown or shelter in place, but it's all means hide. It's the same kind of thing. And almost always, since I say hide, I think that gets put out almost like a continuum, like you need to do this and then this and then this. And I don't want you to think about it like that. I want you to think about it, what's the best option for me given my circumstances? Because the school, Norris Hall at Virginia Tech, that's a 2-story building. Like this is a 2-story building, I'm pretty sure, right? Okay. A lot of the people that died that day wouldn't have had to die. They could have broke a window, opened a window, something like that, and gotten out. Even if you're on the 2nd floor, break the window, get out. You know, distance between you and the bad guy is what we're going for here. That is the #1 action. You might break your leg or something like that, but it's better than being dead. So that's why I always tell people distance is really the most important thing of the hide aspect. Now, on the other hand, if you're in a wheelchair or you're somehow, you know, not able to move very well for whatever reason, then maybe hide would be your best resource. And in that case, you know, you're just going to want to be as quiet as possible. You're going to want to do your best to barricade it. They do have, I think, Gunny, what are we talking about? They have like a little belt strap thing that you can disable the mechanism on.
Yes, sir, for the ones that open in.
Yeah, yeah. Those aren't a bad idea either because it makes it that much more difficult. So whatever we can do to make it more difficult on the person that's trying to do this, let's do it. And then, like I said, go all out or not at all, right, for that one. So yeah, if you do decide to run, which I highly recommend, try to be as obvious as possible, because what's going to happen is once the 911 call comes out and we know what's going on, law enforcement from everywhere within earshot is going to converge on that spot. And we don't know most of the time who the bad guy is other than a very rough description. We don't know if there are multiple bad guys. We don't know, you know, a lot of different things. If there's like somebody waiting outside with like a secondary incendiary device, that kind of thing. It's hard to say. So be as obvious as you possibly can, you know. If you have to, you know, put your arms like this or up or whatever, just run right out the door. Most of us aren't gonna stop you. If you know something, you know, like, you know, shooter has a red sweater on and, you know, something more than college-age white male, because that's what it always seems like it is. So if you have information, make sure you get it to somebody. And another thing, I'm not sure if it's in here or not, if you happen to get the weapon away from the shooter or the stabber or whatever, take something like that trash can, empty it out, and put that weapon in there, and then bear hug that thing and walk out the door with it. A lot of law enforcement and first responders are trained to, obviously we're not going to think that is like the most special garbage can in the world, because it needs to be saved, you know. we're gonna know that you have something in there, and that's why you have that. So pick something like that that's easily movable, and then, you know, get out and get it to one of the good guys. And then stay in the area unless you're told to leave. Don't huddle around each other like making a big group, but, you know, once you get behind, you know, the cordon area. Yeah, this gives you a little bit better idea of what I was talking about just right before. Everybody in here knows the difference between cover and concealment, I'm sure, but most of my groups I talk to have no idea what I'm talking about, so I don't have to explain it to you. But. Buddy aid is another important thing that I don't think is in this slide, which I'm going to add. Because I love firefighters, I love paramedics, but they are not coming in, let's be real about this, they're not coming in until that scene is safe, right? So what are you gonna do in the meantime? You gotta play your best ER doctor and stop bleeding, you know, do as best as you can with what you've got, and you might be in there anywhere from 15 minutes to a couple hours. It just kind of depends on the situation. So become very, very familiar with those concepts as well. Yelling also gets you to just open up your airway and breathe so you don't clam up. So that's typically why we advise people to yell. And then, you know, if we are law enforcement responding, we're going to be able to tell where you're at a little bit better because you're yelling. Obviously, if you know these things, that's what we want to know. The type of weapon is really important too, because that's going to dictate what type of response we use as far as when we form up like our actual tactical teams. For the most part, we do train on like a solo response too, because it's going to be somebody in uniform that's responding the most of the time. It takes 40 minutes to an hour or so to get like a SWAT team together, generally speaking. And people that are on those teams are from all different hours of the day, all different shifts. So yeah, the type of weapons is quite important, because if it's a rifle, it's going to be game over for whoever gets hit. This is kind of what I'm talking about. This is more what responders are going to look like. Than, I mean, you think about a tactical response, it's usually going to be more along the lines of one of those photos, but we're the ones that are actually on shift. And most of these things statistically, and this is probably the only statistics you're going to get from me. I hate statistics because then we get too narrow-sighted and things, but most of them happen during the day. They happen during, you know, 8 to 5-ish, when people are at work, when people are at school, that kind of stuff. I don't think that's probably a shock to anybody. Primary goal is to neutralize the threat. That's kind of why I said, you know, the scene isn't going to change until we can make that happen. We can make sure that person or persons aren't hurting anyone else. Another comment we get a lot with the VERT training is, and this is usually straight up civilians that comment on this, but they're shocked to see that officers just like bypass somebody that's injured and they just keep going, you know, until they get to what they need to do. And to explain it really plainly, we can't take our time to stop and render aid, because once we do that, what have we become? Possible statistic. You know, you gotta stop the killing from happening first. And that, again, goes back to the argument on you have to do buddy aid. The people that are able will have to do buddy aid. Pretty common sense. Okay, we're getting towards the end here. I'm right at about 40 minutes, so it's a little quicker than I thought, but reviewing some of the things we talked about. So evacuating, you know, if you can't do that, you're gonna probably hide, but again, it depends on the circumstances, and then, you know, fight back as a last resort. I think this crowd in particular probably is a little bit more cognizant of things like, you know, take note of where the exits are when you go in a room, different things like that. We know cardinal direction a little bit better than your average person does, at least hopefully. So this was kind of a compilation that I put together from a few different things. Some of it I wrote myself, some of it I just vampirized from other presentations. That's how we do it. But if you ever get a chance to read more up on it, these gentlemen right here on the top line are very well versed in the field of threat management. I've seen Dr. Malloy speak before, knows his stuff. So that's all I have. Do people have questions for me? I know this is kind of a heavy-handed topic, especially almost 5 p.m. on Thursday afternoon.